Hello, friends. Harvey passed away from complications of younger onset Alzheimer's disease on October 27th, 2018. Since then, with the distance of time and the perspective of hindsight, I've come to realize how grief has been an integral part of my life, both in the past, in the present, and the future. Hello, I'm Dr. Renee Harmon, the author of Surfing the Waves of Alzheimer's. And in that book, I devote an entire chapter to grief, but it really only brushes the surface. I've written another blog post specifically about ambiguous loss, and I'll provide a link to that blog post in the description of this video. But I want to talk a little bit more about some different aspects of grief today. So when I looked up different types of grief on the internet, I found a cornucopia of articles. I'll provide a link to one which describes 18 different types of grief. So much grief. For Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, anticipatory grief is a biggie. So this is the type of grief experienced by patients and their families who have been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And with Alzheimer's disease, that can mean long years of grieving the past, the present, and the future. So how does one grieve for the past? Well, it's nostalgia. It's looking back on the past life with a mix of love and sadness. When I look back on our early years of young love and starting a practice, starting a family, it is with that mix of that nostalgic mix of love and sadness. And how does one grieve the present? Well, I grieved each passing moment as it came, grieving each milestone that he crossed, each milestone that he missed of our daughter's lives, grieving each present moment as it came. And grieving for the future was pretty prominent. I began to grieve for our future life together as soon as I recognized that there was something going on with Harvey's cognition. I grieved for our future plans of travel. I grieved for what he was going to lose in the future, and I grieved for our that he would miss out on so many of those milestones of our daughters, their graduations, their weddings, grandchildren. Ambiguous loss and disenfranchised grief are two other types of grief that are fairly common with the dementias. So ambiguous loss, as it pertains to dementia, is that feeling of knowing that even though your loved one is alive, they're not who they used to be. So they are here but not here. And this can just feel uneasy and ambiguous. I like that term for that loss, that sense of just not really knowing how to grieve when your loved one is still there. And disenfranchised grief is kind of this twin sister of that. This is when your grief feels discounted by others. And with dementia, it's because your loved one is still alive, and people might might wonder why you're grieving when your loved one is still alive. And it's all those things that people say when they're well-meaning, and they're saying, I call them the at leasts, at least she still knows you. And they're well-intentioned. And even if someone says something like, oh, she seems to be having a really good day today, it can kind of feel like a slap in the face or undermining the deep grief that you are feeling. And then there's the grief of your loss of a role of caregiver once your loved one does pass away. So there can be relief that the suffering is over, but there can also be this sense of loss of, who am I now if I'm not a caregiver? How am I going to structure my days? So I do want to acknowledge all the different phases of grief, but I don't want to end there, because I do know that grief where there is deep grief, there was once deep love. When you grieve someone deeply, that means you loved them deeply and you miss that person deeply. And you can be scarred by that, but some scars are beautiful. Scars can transform you. I know that I have been transformed by the scars of Alzheimer's disease in my life. And it changed me into the person that I am today. I'm not better for it, I'm just different. And I'm mostly grateful and thankful for the gift of Harvey in my life. Thank you. Be well and keep your balance.